All right, I'm going to try this. This is my first time ever trying to speak in front of a crowd like this, so here goes. My name is Kelly Lynn. I was assigned male at birth. I'm a trans female. I lived a pretty normal childhood until probably around the age of 10 or 11 years old, at which point I learned about what was going to happen with puberty. And I realized that that was exactly the wrong thing. I started dreading that time. I knew that it was going to be exactly the wrong thing happening to me. So I went to bed every single night praying to God to let me wake up as a girl. I did that for years until it really started taking hold in my body. The changes started happening in my body. And I switched over to starting to wish not to wake up in the morning because I thought there was nothing at all I could do about it. There was no language for any of that in the early 80s. The only evidence that I ever saw of transgender people in those days was what you'd see on like Maury Povich or whatever the shows were at that time. It was always a punchline or someone who was a deviant, someone that nobody ever wanted to be like. I went through years of despair before I learned to hide it from myself, hide it from the world, and just kind of make my way through my life at that point. And I did my thing. I did exactly what I was expected to in society. I studied all the boys in school. And I learned how to put on a camouflage, how to behave like one of the boys so I wouldn't get bullied, and I wouldn't get ridiculed. And even though I was in a deep, dark depression for a good portion of my life, I did the things that was prescribed to me. I went out and I got a job. I got married, I had children, always thinking that that next thing, that next step that in society's checklist would be the thing that made me whole, the thing that fixed what was going on with me. And yet, it never did. I would dress in women's clothes on the slide, and then I would completely forget about it because it was like a pressure valve. I was like a pressure cooker. The longer I would go without being able to express myself, the more the pressure would build. So I would dress up, and then I would take it all off, and I would forget all about it. And then a month would pass, and I would repeat the same thing over again. And as I rounded up into my 20s, I was looking back at my childhood and my adolescence and saying, well, wait a minute, why is it that I don't remember so much of my life? It's just missing. And I spent years trying to figure out what I was blocking, thinking it had to have been just the worst trauma that was out there in the darkness behind the missing memories. I finally, in 2013, during one of those times when I was dressing up, I thought, you know what? I kind of wonder, are there other people like me? Am I the only one who feels this way? Does it work like this? And I looked on the internet and I found out that there was a large community of people who were men who get relief dressing as women, and it makes them feel right and it makes them feel whole. And I said, that is so me. I came out to myself as a cross-dresser at that point in 2013, and I started going to the cross-dressing support group at the Grand Rapids Pride Center. That's where I met Amy Pond and Nikki back there. And they gave me the courage to step out into the world for the first time as myself. The ability to get past the shame that I had internalized and I had felt for such a long time. And at that point, I did find that was part of what was missing in my life, but I also came out to my wife at the time of 13 years, the person with whom I had had 2 children. And that person told me that they couldn't ever be intimate with me anymore if they could even picture me dressing as a woman. And she saw fit right then to withhold all affection from me, to completely push me out from the marriage that we had worked on for such a long time. And so we ended up growing apart as time went on, and I explored my sexuality in that way, or my gender identity, wrong word at first there. And we grew apart, and I also discovered during that time that I was different from a lot of the other girls at the support group. For me, the darkest part was the taking off of the makeup and the taking off of the clothes. At the end of the night, it was darn near painful for me to do that. It was taking off my identity and putting back on the shield and the costume that I've been wearing for nearly my entire life. And that grew more and more, and then finally I ended up getting divorced in 2016 and moving out on my own. My ex got everything. I lost pretty much everything. I lost custody of my children. I lost my home. But I did move out on my own, and I found my own place. And as of that day, I socially transitioned. Even though I still had to work for another year in male clothes and name, at that point, I lived in the world as Kelly. I started HRT with the help of my psychiatrist and a doctor, and it's been an amazing ride since then. I transitioned on the job in 2014, and even though I work for a small business in Zealand, and the first thing they told me was, it's completely against their religion, but they'll keep me on. And even though they forced me to wear men's uniforms, to this day, keep my hair in a ponytail, wear no jewelry, no perfume, they do everything they can to keep me in that male box still. I've still been visible every single day. They all know who I am. They all see me as the happy, self-adjusted woman that I am. And every day, the things change a little bit. Just being out there, being visible, is probably the most important thing that any of us can do. I think it's really easy to hate somebody that you don't personally know. When you know a whole person, you know their story, you know their life, and you know what really makes them tick, it's really hard to truly hate anybody. So really, that's, no matter what the challenges that I've had in my transition and my life, I think that for every single person I encounter, whether they know my story or not, they can see me as the happy, well-adjusted trans woman that's a great example of the community. I'm a service technician, actually, for my job. I go in from business to business to business throughout all of West Michigan. And I understand that with my height and the restrictions placed upon me by my work, yeah, I don't always pass. But you know what? You don't have to. It's not a requirement to live your life. It makes things easier in society, but it's absolutely not necessary. And really, it's living out loud that makes things better for each and every one of us going forward. Thank you all so much for the moment to be able to tell my story. I really appreciate it all, and I really hope you all continue to be visible and to be allies and the wonderful people you